Separation Restored Saraswati Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gantraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Jai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, Chapter number 13, titled The Appearance of Lord Varaha. Text number 12. Param susrusanam Param susrusanam Shat praja rakshaya nipa Shat praja rakshaya nipa Bhagavamste praja bhartur Bhagavamste praja bhartur Rishikesu anutusyati Rishikesu anutusyati Param susrusanam Shat praja rakshaya nipa Bhagavamste praja bhartur Rishikesu anutusyati Param susrusanam Shat praja rakshaya nipa Bhagavamste praja bhartur Rishikesu anutusyati. Param susrusanamaya Rishikesu anutusyati. Param susrusanamaya Shat praja rakshaya nipa Bhagavamste praja bhartu Rishikesu anutusyati. Param susrusanamaya Shat praja rakshaya nipa Bhagavamste praja bhartu Rishikesu anutusyati. What Param susrusanamaya Shat praja rakshaya nipa Rishikesu anutusyati. Param susrusanamaya Shat praja rakshaya nipa Bhagavamste praja bhartu Rishikesu anutusyati. Word for translation. Param, the greatest. Susrusanam, devotional service. Mayam, unto me. Shat, should be. Praja, the living entities born in the material world. Rakshaya, by saving them from being spoiled. Nipa, O King, Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, Te, with you, Praja Bhartu, with the protector of the living beings, Rishikeshaha, the Lord of the senses, Anutusyati, is satisfied. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation. O King, if you can give proper protection to the living beings in the mature world, that will be the best service for me. When the Supreme Lord sees you to be a good protector of the conditioned souls, certainly the master of the senses will be very pleased with you. Purport: the whole administrative system is arranged for the purpose of going back home, back to Godhead. Brahma is the representative of the Supreme Personality Godhead, and Manu is the representative of Brahma. Similarly, all the other kings on different planets of the universe are representatives of Manu. The law book for the entire human society is the Manu Samhita, which directs all activities towards the transcendental service of the Lord. Every king, therefore, must know that his responsibility in administration is not merely to exact taxes from the citizens, but to see personally that the citizens under him are being trained in Vishnu worship. Everyone must be educated in Vishnu worship and engaged in the devotional service of Rishikesha, the owner of the senses. The conditioned souls are meant not to satisfy their mature senses, but to satisfy the senses of Rishikesha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the purpose of the complete administrative system. One who knows this secret, as disclosed here in the version of Brahma, is the perfect administrative head. One who does not know this is a show bottle administrator. By training the citizens in the devotional service of the Lord, the head of a state can be free in his responsibility. Otherwise, he will fail in the erroneous duty entrusted to him and thus be punishable by the supreme authority. There is no other alternative in the discharge of administrative duty. Om Ajnanatimmirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksurmanitam Yena Tasmei Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So thank you for everyone for coming to Srimad Bhagavatam class today. So we're continuing our discussion from chapter 13 of the third canto titled The Appearance of Lord Varaha. So we haven't come to the actual appearance of Lord Varaha yet in this chapter, but at the start of this chapter we're seeing a very instructive conversation between Lord Brahma and his son, Swayambhuva Manu. So Lord Brahma, he's just in the process of secondary creation, and he's endeavoring to populate the universe with all different living entities. And to achieve his goal, he's been creating different living entities. For example, first he created the 4 Kumaras, then Rudra was born, then he created different sages. And now in the end of the previous chapter, we saw how from Lord Brahma came Swayambhuva Manu and his wife, Queen Satarupa. And at the start of this chapter, we saw how Swayambhuva Manu, as the ideal example of an ideal disciple or ideal son, how in such a surrendered, humble, submissive mood, he's coming and surrendering himself unto his father, Lord Brahma, who is also acting as his spiritual master also. And Brahma, being so pleased by Swayambhuva Manu's submission, full surrender, humility, him completely giving himself to him, Brahma, he feels very pleased at heart. And now in these verses which we're reading in this chapter, Brahma is glorifying his son, Swayambhu Manu, saying that I'm very much pleased by your consciousness, the way you're approaching me. I'm very much pleased by your surrender, by your submission, by your humility. And in this way, Brahma, he glorifies his son, Swayambhu Manu. And now he is giving instructions to his son, Swayambhu Manu, on what service he can do for the pleasure of Brahma and for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. So in today's verse, Brahma is particularly instructing his son, Swayambhu Manu, that firstly instructs to, create good progeny, populate the universe. And then in this today's verse is particularly mentioning that after the universe is populated, you should rule the universe as the king, as a big administrative head, and you give protection to all the living entities in this universe. And if you do this, Brahma assures him, not only will you please me, but you will please the Supreme Lord. So that's what today's verse is talking about. And in the purport, Prabhupada is further elaborating on the duties and the responsibility of a king or a government leader or of a leader in general, of any kind of Kshatriya or anyone who's doing any sorts of administrative duty. What are his responsibilities? What should his qualities be? What should his job description be? That's what Prabhupada is discussing today in the purport. But before we come to that, I thought we'll just discuss one point regarding Swayambhu Manu, what we can learn from him. Because in a few verses earlier on, I think three verses earlier on, when I was going through the purport in the class, we were going through the purport together, and one thing that Prabhupada said in that purport really struck me. And I thought this is something very important, which we can all take great lesson from. So as was mentioned before, this start of this chapter particular, the highlight of the chapter is the submissive mood in which Swayambhu Manu surrenders unto Brahma. And Prabhupada, he picks up on this, and in the purport of text number 9, Prabhupada, he mentions something very amazing. Just like in the mature world, at the moment, one thing which everyone is very much attracted to or which catches the eye is how to make more and more money. And there's many persons on YouTube or persons who write books on how people can make money very quickly. How you can become a millionaire in 1 year, how you can double your money, how you can triple your money. Like this, people, they post many videos on YouTube, they become a big hit, or they write many books. How you can double your money in just 5 months, or how you can double your money in 6 months. How you can triple the money you have in 1 year. So, in a similar way, Prabhupada, he explains in text number 9's purport, how we can make spiritual advancement very quickly, how we can multiply the spiritual credits we have very quickly. Not just double our spiritual credits, triple our spiritual credits, quadruple our spiritual credits, but in the purport to text 9, Prabhupada, he gives a secret of devotional service by which we can increase our spiritual credits by tenfold. Not double, triple, quadruple, by 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, but Prabhupada explains how we can make advancement in spiritual life by tenfold. How we can multiply our spiritual credits by tenfold, times 10. So how is that? Prabhupada explains this we can learn from Swayambhu Manu. So in text 9, Prabhupada, he explains, just like going a step backward before we go into what Prabhupada is saying, we all understand that, like in my Guru Maharaj, he explains that the more guidance we have, spiritual guidance we have in our spiritual lives, the more fortunate we are, and the more wealthy we have, the more wealthy we are in our spiritual lives. So the more senior devotees we have around us, the more mentors we have, the more spiritual guidance we have freely available to us, the more lucky we are, the more fortunate we are, and the more wealthy we are in our spiritual lives. And that's what determines spiritual wealth. So one who has a lot of spiritual guidance, spiritual instructions available to him, he is said to be the most wealthy person in actuality. So if someone is getting more spiritual guidance, it means he's more fortunate, he's more wealthy. Now, understanding this, one can say that the more spiritual instructions he is able to acquire from different advanced devotees, the more fortunate he is. Because these senior devotees, these advanced devotees, they know all the ins and outs of devotional service, and they can tell him, okay, if you do this, you can make advancement very quickly. If you do this, you can please Shri Radha Gopinath nicely. If you do this, this won't be pleasing to the Vaishnavas. If you do this, you might commit an offense, you might go backwards. So in this way, the more guidance we have, the more advancement we can make more quickly. So understanding this, Prabhupada, he explains. So I'll read this line from the purport to text 9. So when we were reading this purport in class, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday, it really struck me, these words by Prabhupada. So Prabhupada writes that every living entity, however small or big he may be, has the choice of independence. If the son is unreservedly willing to be guided by the father is 10 times more eager to instruct and guide him by all means. So this is the secret. Prabhupada explains that from our side, what should we do? From our sides, as the disciple of the spiritual master, we ourselves should be unreservedly, completely surrender ourselves onto the spiritual master and be ready to take up any instruction or any guidance from the spiritual master. If from our sides we're acting very enthusiastically, showing great eagerness and willingness to get instruction and carry it out, then naturally the spiritual master, seeing us being so enthusiastic, the spiritual master will feel more happy to instruct us more. Otherwise, if from our side we're very lazy, not so enthusiastic, holding things back, then the spiritual master will think twice before telling us something. He'll think, if I give him too many instructions, he'll think it's a burden for him. Or if I give him too many services, he'll think it's a burden for him. And in this way, instead of making advancement, he'll go backwards. So let me not fully give myself to this person, because he has his own motives, he has his own selfish desires, and if I instruct him too much, then he might get offended. He might think, I'm getting too many instructions, too many chastisements, too many corrections. But if, on the other hand, Prabhupada explains, if the disciples follow in the footsteps of Swayambhu Manu and just completely surrender unto the Guru, showing great enthusiasm and eagerness, just like Swayambhu Manu is doing. Brahma hasn't said anything to Swayambhu Manu, but Swayambhu Manu, he himself is coming, offering obeisance to Brahma and saying that you are my father, I'm completely surrender unto you. You please instruct me what I can do for you. You please give me some service. Please engage me in your service. So when someone does like this, naturally you're like astonished, like, wow, who is this person? So sincere. He's just completely surrendering himself unto me. He's begging me, please give me some service. He's begging me, please give me some instruction. So naturally, if someone like that is coming to you, whatever you have in your heart, you will just naturally bestow upon that person. All the blessings will just naturally flow onto that personality, being pleased by his sincere submission and surrender. And whatever good things we know from our experience, from our learnings from others, we would naturally just, without any reservation, just completely bestow upon that person, being completely melted by that person's surrender and full enthusiasm to get more instructions to be guided. So that's what Prabhupada is saying. If we do the same thing that Swayambhu Manu is doing, by being very enthusiastic to get service, by being very enthusiastic to get instructions, to be guided in spiritual life, then the spiritual master, what he'll do, he'll be more eager to give us spiritual instruction and guidance by 10 times more. So because the spiritual master is 10 times more eager to instruct us, we'll get 10 times more guidance. And because we get 10 times more guidance, naturally we'll make 10 times more quicker spiritual advancement. So in this way, Prabhupada explains how we can multiply our spiritual credits by tenfold. How we can make spiritual advancement in our lives by 10 times more. Just like you have two disciples. One disciple, the spiritual master sees that he is not fully surrendered. Whatever I instruct him, he feels a bit offended. And the spiritual master is very hesitant to give him any service or any instructions, any corrections. He has to think think 10 times before telling him anything, because he knows this guy, he has a big false ego. If I tell him anything, he'll get offended. So better not to tell anything. So the spiritual master, he just keeps a bit of a distance from this disciple, doesn't give him too much instruction, just tells him to do the basics. On the other hand, you have disciple number 2, and this disciple is like Swayambhu Manu, just completely surrendered, coming up to him, telling him, Gurudev, please, I'm surrendered unto you. Because of you, I've been saved. I'm indebted to you. You please guide me. You please instruct me. Tell me what service I can do. Whatever you ask, I will do it without any question, to my full capacity. Any service you ask, I'll do it. So naturally, the spiritual master will give him more and more services to the disciple number 2, because the spiritual master knows, okay, he has proper consciousness, he has proper mood, he can handle what I give him. And naturally, the spiritual master will also guide that disciple more, will correct him more, and give him more spiritual instructions. So in this way, disciple number 2, he will get more and more services, more and more spiritual instructions, and he will quickly advance more and more and more and more in spiritual life. On the other hand, the disciple number 1, because of his false ego, because of his hesitation to fully surrender, naturally, the spiritual master will be hesitant to give him any services, will be hesitant to correct him, or to point out anywhere he's going wrong in his spiritual life. So in this way, he will continue to stay in that position where he is. And he won't advance. He will advance very little bit. Instead, he can even go backwards by continuing to do more Seva Aparad, Vaishnava Aparad. So this is the way Prabhupada explains. This is the secret by how we can multiply our spiritual credits by not just double, triple, quadruple, but by 10 times. And we can advance in our spiritual life 10 times more quicker by doing this. Just like yesterday we were hearing from Kamsari Prabhu, he was giving the example of the early disciples of Srila Prabhupada, how with such innocent faith and simplicity, they would just follow whatever Prabhupada said. Without any question, without any doubt, with full surrender, whatever Prabhupada said, Prabhupada's early disciples would just follow. So Prabhupada's disciples, they were following this principle that Prabhupada is talking about in this purport, that we can learn from Swayambhu Manu. That they just completely surrendered themselves unto Prabhupada, and that's why they advanced so quickly. If you think about it, all of these early disciples of Srila Prabhupada, they were all hippies. They were all breaking the 4 regulated principles. They were all engaged in gambling, illicit sex, intoxication, drugs, meat eating, so on and so forth. So they're all coming from such, crazy backgrounds. But from such a lowly position, they immediately became, in just a year's time, Prabhupada made them into sannyasis, GBCs, temple presidents, and Prabhupada empowered them to open up centers and to create hundreds and thousands of Krishna bhaktas all around the world. So how does this happen? How did someone go from 0 to 100 in just a year's time? Not even 0. How did someone go from minus 100? Because all of these early disciples of Srila Prabhupada, it's not that they were just on a plain ground, just proper, nice, sattvic human beings, but they were on the other end of the scale, just doing all sinful activities. Just like Jagai Madai, it's mentioned that they would go through the Shastras and they would pick out, all those things the Shastra says one shouldn't do, Jagai Madai, they would go out and purposely do those sinful activities. So that's pretty much the story of the early disciples of Prabhupada. All of these hippies, who were coming to Srila Prabhupada, they were breaking all the 4 regulated principles. They were engaging in every single sort of sinful activity one can imagine. So they weren't even in 0, they were like in minus 100. But Prabhupada took them from minus 100 all the way to 100 in just a year's time. One day they were hippies engaging in all the sinful activities. A year later they were sannyasis, GBCs. A year later they were opening temples, making hundreds and thousands of devotees. A year later they were translating Prabhupada's books into foreign languages. A year later they were top book distributors, temple presidents, so on and so forth. A year later they were head pujari of temples. A year later they were establishing deities in different cities all around the world. So how did this happen so quickly, just like that? How did these conditioned souls immediately go from minus 100 to 100 just in a year's time? Because they knew the secret of devotional service. Because they knew the secret of how to advance in spiritual life with 10 times the speed. How to increase your spiritual credits by 10-fold. Which is, from your side, from our side, we should just completely surrender unto the spiritual master, just like Swayambhu Manu is doing. Without any reservation, full surrender. When the spiritual master sees that this disciple, he's fully surrendered unto me, he has no false ego, anything I ask him to do, he will do it. Any instruction I give him, he will do it. He won't hold anything back, he has no false ego. Whatever I give to him, he will worship that and he will fully, sincerely carry it out. When the spiritual master sees that, then naturally, whatever the spiritual master has with him, whatever assets he has, he will just helplessly bestow upon that disciple. So that's the example, practical real-life example we've seen in recent times of these early disciples of Prabhupada. Although they were coming from such lowly backgrounds, they immediately became so elevated because of their absolute surrender to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada knew that these disciples of mine, whatever I asked them to do, they'll do. So naturally, Prabhupada, he gave his heartful blessings to all of these disciples. He empowered them and gave them so much spiritual instructions by which they could advance so quickly. And so this is something very important we can all take. And I'll just go through some of the words from the word-for-word translation, some of the words that Lord Brahma is using to glorify Swayambhu Manu's surrender, his submissive attitude by which he is surrendering unto him. And this is something we can meditate on. And if we can somehow or other imbibe this very humble spiritual devotional mood of Swayambhu Manu, then we can also multiply spiritual credits by tenfold. First thing, so this is in text 9. Brahma is saying, Pritaha. Prita means, I'm very pleased. Swasti, all blessings. So this is what happens when one pleases the spiritual master with one's humble, submissive surrender, then the spiritual master is forced to helplessly give all of his blessings onto the student, onto the disciple. Then Brahma is saying, Nirvya Likena. Nirvya Likena means without reservation. So this is the mood in which we should surrender unto the spiritual master, without holding anything back. That now I'm completely surrendered unto you, without reservations, I'm giving my life to you. You please do with me whatever you want. So without reservation, not holding back, not keeping 20% of our lives for ourselves and giving the spiritual master 80% control. Or 50% of our lives is under our control, the other 50% we give to our spiritual authorities. No, without reservation, give full control to the Guru, give full control to the spiritual master. Then he says, Atmana Arpitam. Atmana Arpita means, Atmana means the self, Arpita means surrendered, fully surrendered. He fully surrenders himself onto Lord Brahma. Then in text 10, Brahma, he says, Sa Adaram. Sa Adaram means with great delight. So this is the thing that Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport, that whenever any instruction comes from the spiritual master, whenever any guidance comes, whenever any service comes from the spiritual master, this should be our mood, sa adram. We should take it upon our heads with great delight. We shouldn't see it as a burden, oh, now I have to do this service, somehow or other, I have to manage my life and do this extra service which my spiritual authority has given. Or, why is my spiritual authority being so harsh on me? Why is he always correcting me and chastising me? If that's our consciousness, immediately we've lost it. What should the consciousness be? Sa adaram, with great delight. Whenever any guidance, correction, or service comes from our spiritual masters, we should take it upon our heads with great delight. And Brahma is noticing this with his son Swayambhu Manu, that I can see that you have this quality of sa adaram. I can see that you're ready to take up any instruction I give you with great delight, with great enthusiasm and vigor. So naturally, when the Guru sees that whatever I tell this guy, he will, with full enthusiasm, take it up fully to his heart, with full enthusiasm and happiness. And naturally, the spiritual master will give more and more instructions, will give more and more services. And by that, we can advance more and more. So this is another quality that Brahma, he notices in his son, sa adaram. And lastly, Brahma says that you're executing it to your full capacity. So whenever any instruction or service comes, we, with great enthusiasm and happiness, take it as the mercy of the Lord, with great delight. And secondly, Brahma is saying, what the disciple should do, he should carry out that service, carry out that instruction to the best of his capacity. If we just sincerely try our best to do whatever service is given to us, then we can please our spiritual master, then we can please Shri Shri Radha Gopinath. So in this way, these two texts, text number 9 and 10, the translations, the word for word, and Prabhupada's amazing purport in text 9, they're very instructive for all of us. So this is one very important lesson we can learn from the example of Swayambhu Manu, in how he's approaching his father and spiritual master Lord Brahma. Now coming to today's purport and verse, it's focusing on the responsibilities of a king or a leader in Vedic culture. So Prabhupada's writing that the responsibility of any administrative head is that he should train all those persons under him, he should train the citizens or those persons working under him in Vishnu worship. He should train them in their spiritual lives to come closer to Shri Shri Radha Gopinath. That is his main primary duty. If he doesn't do that, and if he just merely exacts taxes from the citizens, then he's not a proper king. And Prabhupada says he's just like a show bottle administrator. He's just a show bottle king. Prabhupada many times will use this word show bottle. What does show bottle mean? They usually have this in, I don't know if they still have it now, but in previous days in pharmacies to display, like the display bottles for medicine will just be like show bottles. There won't be any actual medicine in there. They will just have some nice fancy bottles at the front of the shop to display. Okay, we have this many, these are the different varieties of medicines we have. So this will be called show bottle, which means it's not the actual product. It's just bottles, just put for show, just for display, just to attract the customers. Okay, we have so many nice range of different medicines in our pharmacy, so on and so forth. So Prabhupada will use this word many times in his purport, and Prabhupada is saying, if a king, if he's just simply taking taxes from the citizens, but from his side, if he's not giving them protection, mature protection and spiritual protection by guiding them, by protecting them from lust and guiding them towards Vishnu worship, if he doesn't do that, then the king, he's just a show bottle king, which means he's not an actual king, he's just a show bottle. He's just a king for show, just a king externally, but not of actual substance. And in the 4th canto of Bhagavatam, Prabhupada, he gives more insights into the duties of the king and the consequences of if a king doesn't perform his duties properly. So in 4th canto, in Maharaj Prithu's section, Prabhupada explains that, again, the same thing. That is the duty of the king, that he should train all of his citizens to become very nice devotees of Krishna. If the king is doing this, if the king is properly taking care of the spiritual lives of all the citizens, then the king can exact the taxes. Then the king is rightful in collecting taxes from the citizens. And as a result of the king doing his duty properly, by maintaining the citizens nicely and by assisting the citizens in coming closer to Krishna, what is the benefit the king will acquire? Maharaj Prithu, he explains, or I'm not sure it's Maharaj Prithu or someone else, but in that section of 4th canto, it's explained that the king will get 1/6 of the pious credits of all the citizens. So all the millions of citizens in the kingdom, 1/6 of all of their pious credits will come to the king, and the king can access all those pious credits in his next life. So this is the result of a king doing his duty properly. On the other hand, Prabhupada explains, if the king is simply exacting taxes from the citizens, but he is not maintaining the citizens properly, or he is not properly taking care of the spiritual lives of the citizens, not assisting them in coming closer to Krishna, then naturally the citizens will engage in sinful activities, and then as a result of that, the king has to get the sinful reaction of all the citizens in his kingdom. So whatever sinful activities the citizens doing in the kingdom, the king will get a certain share of that, of all the citizens in the kingdom. And Prabhupada, he goes on to mention that this principle of the king not doing his duty properly and the citizens going off track from Krishna Bhakti, the citizens going off to engage in sinful activities, and the king getting a share of their bad karma, Prabhupada explains this principle also holds true in the case of parents and in the case of spiritual master and disciples also. So the same principle also holds true for parents and children, and Prabhupada explains the same principle also holds true for spiritual master and disciples. Which means, just like it's the king's responsibility to make sure the citizens are doing Krishna Bhakti properly and are coming closer to Krishna, in the same way it is every parent's duty or responsibility to bring up the children in Krishna consciousness. And it is also every spiritual master's duty to bring up the disciples nicely in Krishna consciousness. And just like the king, he gets 1/6 of the credit of all the pious activities that the citizens do, if he's doing his duty properly. In the same way, whatever good things the children do, we try our best from our side to make our children Krishna conscious, then our children engage in devotional service bhakti. For every single devotional activity the children do, a certain share of those spiritual credits comes to the parents also. So in this way, devotee parents, they get to double dip. My Guru Maharaj explains like this, that devotee parents, they get the credits of whatever devotional service they're doing, so they get that credit. On top of that, they get to double dip, which means on top of that, whatever spiritual activities their children are doing, they'll get to take a certain share of that also. So in this way, devotee parents, my Guru Maharaj explains, they get to double dip and they get to make more advancement. They get the credits of their own devotional activities, and they also get a certain share of the credits of all their children, of all the spiritual activities their children are doing. So in this way, they get multiple spiritual credits and they advance very nicely. Same thing holds true, but on the other hand, if the parents, just like if the king is irresponsible, doesn't guide the citizens engage in sinful activities, then the king has to take all the bad karma of the citizens. So in the same way, same thing also holds true for the parents. If the parents are irresponsible and they don't do the duty of raising the children in Krishna consciousness, then the parents also have to take a certain share of the sins that the children are doing. Of course, from our side, we try our best to make our children to devotees, and then we just leave it up to Krishna. Sometimes it happens that despite all the efforts of the parents, sincere efforts of parents, the children still, they go wayward. That's a different story. But this is in the case of someone not doing the duty, that the parents are negligent from their side and they're not properly training or guiding their children. And similarly, Prabhupada explains, the same thing also holds true for spiritual master and disciples. It's the duty of spiritual master to guide the disciples. And if the disciples go offward, and if the disciples engage in sinful activities, then a certain share of those sinful karma has to be experienced by the spiritual master. And Prabhupada explains that's the reason. Like sometimes Prabhupada, he would get some sickness, and one of these times, one of the disciples was asking Srila Prabhupada that, Srila Prabhupada, we hear from your purports that the spiritual master, he is a liberated soul. And since you're liberated, how is it that you're getting sick? How is it you're getting sickness? And then Prabhupada, he very gravely explains that yes, the spiritual master is liberated, but for whatever sins, whatever sinful activities the disciples do, the spiritual master, he has to get a certain portion of that. And that's why the spiritual master, all of these mishaps, the spiritual master, or sicknesses, or spiritual master tripping and breaking a bone, all of these things are not due to his karma, because he's a liberated soul, he has no karma, but it's due to the bad karma of his disciples. So then Prabhupada, he explains to the disciple, that's why it's very important that all of you, my disciples, you very responsibly, practice spiritual life very properly. Otherwise, if you go wayward, if you go and engage in sinful activities, then I also have to suffer. I also have to take part in that karma. Just like when the citizens go offward, the king, he has to take a certain share of the bad karma of the citizens. And Prabhupada will explain that sometimes the spiritual master, he also has to go through a lot of bad dreams, because at the time of initiation, the spiritual master, he takes all of the karma of the disciple he's initiating. And because of that, sometimes the spiritual master, he has to go through bad dreams to nullify all of that bad karma that he is very selflessly in Krishna's service taking up from the conditioned souls. So in this way, Prabhupada, he very nicely in 4th canto, he explains this regarding the duties of a king and what is the result if the king does his duty properly and what is the result if the king doesn't do his duty properly. Another section of Bhagavatam, which is very instructive in terms of the duties of a king, is in 5th canto with the example of King Gaya. In that section, 5 things are mentioned of what a king should be doing. Number 1, Praja Palana, which means he should be giving protection to the subjects. Protection in the terms of both physical protection from thieves and rogues, and also protection in terms of protection from lust. Okay, so the word Kshatriya literally means, Trayate means to deliver or to protect, and Shat means hurt. So Kshatriya means one who protects his citizens from hurt. Hurt, physical hurt from rogues and thieves, and also spiritual hurt from the greatest enemy, lust. So that's the first duty of the king, Praja Palana. Next, Bhagavatam explains, is Posana. Posana means to make sure that all the citizens, they have proper food and they're properly maintained. They have proper food, shelter, clothes, so on and so forth. And we might think that, okay, these different things given in Bhagavatam, it only applies for kings. But actually, we can take these principles for any leader, for anyone who is a leader, who has certain devotees or personnel under him, it's his responsibility to do all of these 5 things, which means anyone, let's say someone is a Bhakti Vriksha leader, then it is that person's, he or she's responsibility to make sure all of those devotees under him or her, firstly they're protected, they have proper protection, that he properly guides them in their spiritual life, and also they have proper food, just like someone volunteers to do book distribution and they come out with us. Then, from our side, one thing we should keep in mind is Poshana, which means to make sure they have enough food. So before that devotee leaves to come out on book distribution, we always ask them, Prabhu, have you packed any prasad for your lunch? Because we'll be out there for 6-7 hours. Have you packed lunch? No? Okay, go to the kitchen or go to the front. Pack some prasad for yourself. Okay, do you have enough prasad? Okay, have you got water? So basic necessities of life, like food, water, is something a leader needs to make sure that all of those persons under him, they have proper food and they have proper water. So this is Poshana. And you'll see Prabhupada so nicely exemplifying this. Like in the later years of Srila Prabhupada, or in the final year of Srila Prabhupada, when Prabhupada was very sick and ill, and Prabhupada was just bedridden pretty much in the final months in Vrindavan. At that time, Prabhupada would barely eat anything. He would just go for days and days and days without eating a single thing. He would just drink a little juice and that would be it. And he would just subsist on that. And devotees' hearts would be pained seeing Prabhupada in such a condition, not eating anything, just taking a little juice, just taking a little water, and that's it. So devotees, they were so much, feeling so much pain seeing Prabhupada in such a condition like this. And it was during this time, one time, Prabhupada, he called His Holiness Bhaktichar Maharaj, who was acting as one of Prabhupada's servants and cooking for Srila Prabhupada. So at this time, Prabhupada, he calls His Holiness Bhaktichar Maharaj and he asks him that you go today and you taste and you sample the prasad of the temple. Then after sampling the prasad of our Vrindavan temple, you come back and you tell me, how is the prasad in this temple? So then Bhaktichar Maharaj, he goes, he samples all the prasad of the temple and he comes back. And Prabhupada asks, so how's the prasad? And then Bhaktichar Maharaj honestly tells Prabhupada that actually Prabhupada, to be honest, the prasad is not so good. The prasad is actually very austere in the temple. And then Prabhupada immediately says, go call the temple president. And then Prabhupada immediately chastises the temple president that, these devotees, they have given up everything for Krishna's service. They've given up their job, their family, they've given up their whole lives for Krishna. And it is your responsibility to take care of all of these devotees who are staying in the temple. It is your responsibility to make sure all of these devotees have nice, proper prasad. From now on, you cook nice, proper prasad and you feed all of the devotees in the temple. In this way, Prabhupada, he chastised the temple president. So this is Prabhupada displaying Poshana, making sure that all of the persons under him as a leader, they have proper food and proper shelter. So Prabhupada, he was very concerned that devotees, they get proper prasad. And Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he was sharing this realization that just see how selfless Prabhupada is. What's Prabhupada's condition? Prabhupada himself, he's not eating anything. He's just gone for weeks and weeks without eating any solid food, just subsisting on liquid. So Prabhupada himself is in such weakly condition, not eating anything. And naturally, when we're in that condition, we'll just be thinking about ourselves that, oh, I'm suffering so much. Or it's been 2 weeks now, or it's been 15 days now. It's been 16 days now since I've eaten any solid food. Oh, it used to be so nice when I used to eat puris and chapatis. How long can I go on like this? When we're in that sickly condition, we'll just be in so much pain that we would only think about ourselves. But Prabhupada, he's so transcendental, he's so selfless, Bhakti Charu Maharaj explains, that all Prabhupada would think about is just simply the welfare of others. He would never think about himself. Even in that sickly condition, what is Prabhupada thinking about? Are the devotees in the temple getting proper prasad? And then he asked Bhakti Charu Maharaj, go and check, is the prasad proper? All these devotees, they've given up their lives for Krishna service, they must get proper prasad. So this is Prabhupada's mood, this is Prabhupada's such selfless consciousness. Even in the final days when Prabhupada is in such sickly condition, Prabhupada's consciousness is just simply going, how I can benefit others, how I can help others. So this is the number one duty of a leader or a king or any kind of administrative head, that he needs to make sure that those persons under him, they have proper food and basic necessities of life. Another time Prabhupada, he notices that one of the Mataji's in the temple, she was wearing a torn old sari. And then Prabhupada immediately, he calls the temple president and tells him that, what is this? How come the devotees in the temple are wearing torn clothes? How come they don't have proper clothes? Immediately go and buy proper clothes and saris for all of these ladies and make sure no one is wearing torn clothes. So again, Prabhupada is displaying this principle of poshana, making sure that the basic necessities of life are present for all of those persons under him. Then prinana. Prinana means making sure that all of those persons under us are happy by giving gifts in charity. And you see, Prabhupada, he would do this. Prabhupada would sit on the Vyasasana, and after Guru Puja or before Guru Puja, Prabhupada will give Mahaprasad to all the disciples and to the little children of the disciples also. And everyone will come forward and they will get Mahaprasad. And many times Prabhupada will get different things in charity. Prabhupada, devotees will gift Prabhupada golden watches, this and that. And Prabhupada will wear it for 1-2 days. Then immediately Prabhupada will be so renounced after getting a nice, full-on fancy watch costing thousands of dollars. Prabhupada will just wear 2-3 days, immediately take off the watch and just give it to some disciple as a gift, just like that in charity. So Prabhupada was so renounced. Another time, Buddhimanta Prabhu, one of the early leading book distributors in America, one time he comes to take personal darshan of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was so pleased with his service of distributing so many big books in America, and also Buddhimanta Prabhu, he started book distribution in Australia also. He came and he taught the devotees how to distribute books in Australia. So one time he came into Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada was so happy and pleased with Buddhimanta Prabhu that Prabhupada immediately, he took off his kurta, and Prabhupada gave his own kurta in charity as a gift to Buddhimanta Prabhu. And Buddhimanta Prabhu, he always worshipped and kept that personal kurta of Srila Prabhupada. So like this, many personal items Prabhupada would just give in gifts as gifts in charity to his disciples to encourage them in their spiritual lives. One time I was hearing one memory of Radhanath Maharaj, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj. He was saying how one time, again, Prabhupada was seated on his Vyasasana, and at this time Radhanath Maharaj, he was one of the pujaris in New Vrindavan. So Maharaj was there as one of the main pujaris there, or even the head pujari there for many years. So one time, the Mahaprasad of the deities in New Vrindavan, Radhanath Maharaj, he brings the whole plate or the whole tray of Mahaprasad to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada sitting on the Vyasasana, Prabhupada is very happy to see such nice Mahaprasad of the Lords. And Prabhupada, he slowly starts sampling, little by little, all of the preparations. So Prabhupada would take a little bit of one item, sample it, and then the rest, the Mahaprasad, Prabhupada would distribute to all the devotees. Then again, another item Prabhupada will sample, then his Mahaprasad, Prabhupada again distribute all the devotees. And then in the end, all that was left was 2 gulab jamuns. And then Prabhupada picks up the 2 gulab jamuns and looks all around the room. And everyone's wondering, give to me, Prabhupada, give to me. Everyone's putting their hands up, give me the gulab jamun. And then Prabhupada looks at the gulab jamun, and instead of giving it, Prabhupada starts eating the gulab jamun himself. So he takes gulab jamun number 1, he bites into it, and as he's biting into it, the gulab jamun juice starts squirting out. And all those disciples standing right in front of Prabhupada, they get squirted from the gulab jamun juice, Radhanath Maharaj explains. Just like in CC, there's the story, right, of Nityananda Prabhu throwing his Maha rice at Advaita Acharya, and then Advaita Acharya dancing up and down in ecstasy. I've been touched by the remnants of the great Paramahamsa Nityananda Prabhu. So in the same way, whichever devotees, they got sprayed by the Maha juice, Gulab Jamun juice from Prabhupada's lotus mouth, they started dancing up and down in ecstasy. So Prabhupada eats half a Gulab Jamun, sprays some devotees with the Maha juice, and then he gives the other half of the Gulab Jamun as Mahaprasad, Mahaprasad. Then again, Prabhupada takes the second Gulab Jamun, again does the same thing. He just bites half. Again, Gulab Jamun juice squirts out, sprays some devotees in their face. And again, Prabhupada gives the other Maha Gulab Jamun in charity. So in this way, many instances, Prabhupada, to encourage the devotees, make them happy, he would give Mahaprasad and gifts in charity to his disciples. So this is Prinana, to make sure that everyone under us are happy, to give them gifts in charity, make sure everyone's enthused. Then, Upalanana. Upalanana means treating those under us like our children, treating those under us as if they were like our sons and daughters. And to call meetings and to satisfy them with sweet words. So call, get together, ask, how is everything going? Is everything going nicely? Are you facing any difficulties? Is there any challenges you're experiencing? And to, just like a father hears out what the son and the daughter is going through, in the same way with great care and concern, the leader or the king, administrator head, he calls meetings, get-togethers, he speaks sweet words of gratitude to his citizens and those followers under him, and he also inquires from them, how are things going, any challenges, anything I can do for you, like this. And last is Anusasana. Anusasana means to correct and to give spiritual instructions to the citizens. So it's also the duty of a leader that if he sees some of those persons under him, if they're doing something wrong, then it's his duty to correct. Just like a parent's duty is to correct the children when they're doing something wrong, in the same way, it's the leader's duty to correct the subordinates under him. And to give them spiritual guidance and to give them instructions. Just like we see Lord Rishabhdev, he gives a series of very beautiful, powerful instructions in the 5th canto. And externally it looks that he is speaking to his 100 sons, but actually Prabhupada explains that actually all of his sons, like Bharat Maharaj, they're already self-realized souls. They're all very advanced devotees. So technically, Rishabhdev, all those instructions he's speaking, actually he's speaking for the benefit of the citizens that are assembled in that arena. He's just using his sons as the direct audience, but essentially he's speaking it's more for the secondary audience, which is the citizens present there. Kind of like the daughter and the daughter-in-law principle. When the mother would like to teach the daughter-in-law a lesson, instead of directly telling the daughter-in-law, the mother would first tell her own daughter, keeping the daughter-in-law as the secondary audience. So that's what Lord Rishabhdev, he does in 5th canto. He wants to instruct the citizens, and he does it by keeping his sons as the primary audience. So it's the duty of a king to give spiritual instructions and guidance to his followers, to his subordinates, and to correct them when they're doing something wrong. And obviously we see Prabhupada with his disciples, whenever he would see them doing something wrong, Prabhupada would gently correct them and guide them properly in their lives. For example, one pastime I was hearing recently, in one temple, the deities in that temple, they were very small size deities. So the devotees, they concocted, okay, because the deities are small, so the prasad we need to make for the deities has to be of a proportionate size to the size of the deities. So because the deities are only this small, the prasad that we give to the deities also has to be that small. So then the Madhijis cooking in that temple, they started making these very, very small, tiny puris, very miniature puris to match the size of the deities. And the offering also, they would just give little sabji, just one small pakora, little chutney, little rice, little dal, and like this they'll make a very small offering for the deities. Because the deities are that small, okay, so we offer like that. So when Prabhupada, he came to the temple and he saw what was going on, he was like, what is going on? Who has concocted all this? And then Prabhupada, he instructed the devotees that this is mature conception. When you cook for the deities, you cook as if you're cooking for a hungry 16-year-old boy. In that mood, that consciousness, you cook a big plate of prasad. How a hungry 16-year-old boy with big appetite would eat, he would eat 10 puris or chapatis, lot of sabjis, a lot of pakoras, chutney, good amount of halwa. Just like a hungry 16-year-old growing boy with big appetite, how he would eat. You think like that and you cook that amount of bhoga and you offer to the Lord like that. So this is one instance of Prabhupada instructing. Another one which I was reading recently is in LA. At this time, Bhavananda Prabhu, he was in charge of the LA temple. And at this time, the devotees, they were doing all-night Sankirtan, which means till like 2 o'clock in the morning, they will be out there, in the major streets of LA, Los Angeles, doing Harinam Sankirtan. Then after doing Harinam Sankirtan, past midnight till 2 o'clock in the morning, they will come back to the temple. And to make things easier for them, what they did is they moved Mangala Arati from 4:30 to 3:30. So then straight after coming from all-night Sankirtan, they could immediately quickly do the Mangala Arati and then go to sleep and knock out till breakfast time. Otherwise, if the Mangala Arati is at 4:30, then they'll come back, sleep for 1 hour, then again wake up, attend Mangala Arati, then again sleep. So it would disturb the sleep after a whole night of Sankirtan. So what the leaders of LA temple did is that they moved Mangala Arati by 1 hour back. So instead of having Mangala Arati at 4:30, they made Mangala Arati at 3:30. So straight after coming from all night Sankirtan, they could immediately just do the Mangala Arati and then just knock out and have nice long good rest before breakfast. So then Prabhupada, he visited this temple, and Prabhupada, he didn't know anything about the late night Sankirtan going on. But he knew that devotees have changed around with the schedule, and Mangala Arati is at 3:30. So 3:30, Prabhupada comes to Mangala Arati, and Prabhupada just takes one look at the deities, and then Prabhupada immediately he walks to Bhavananda Prabhu. And then all the